I want you to imagine the police come knocking at your door, they put you in handcuffs, and they're taking you down to the station saying that you committed a crime you know nothing about. You think it'll be okay, they'll realize their mistakes, and they'll let you go in no time. The problem is, that time never comes, and the next thing you know, you're on death row for a crime that you didn't commit. Now I want you to imagine the evidence that proves your innocence comes, but you can't imagine the next part because you're already gone. Today I want to talk to you about the errors of the death penalty. I know many of you probably never even thought about the death penalty, but it's our tax dollars funding it, and it can be our vote that ends it. One wrongful conviction can destroy a life, a family, and our trust in the justice system. Now, like many of you, I've never even really thought about the death penalty. It wasn't until one of my professors wanted us to write an essay on whether or not we thought the death penalty should be abolished. And my first thought was, of course it shouldn't be, because people are wicked and they're cruel and they need to pay the price for their crimes. It wasn't until she showed us a video from Bryan Stevenson telling us about all the innocent lives that have been and still are on death row. After that video, my whole perspective changed, and I started to research why the death penalty should be abolished, and I found how inhumane the death penalty is, along with all the discrimination, the errors, and the unfair trials that come with it. Today I want to talk to you about the irreversibility, the discrimination, and the ineffectiveness of the deterrent. Amnesty International tells us that since 1973, 200 people have been exonerated from death row. The death penalty is a life or death issue. In a system that makes mistakes, how are we able to make a decision that there is no coming back from? For example, Cameron Todd Willingham was executed in 2004. He was convicted of setting a fire that killed his 3 children. Later, fire experts concluded that he didn't set the fire and that it was an accident. The state wouldn't reopen the case, and Cameron was executed. For every 8 people executed, 1 person is exonerated. You might argue that the system gets it right more times than they get it wrong, and that's true, but how are we going to be okay with the system making a mistake that takes an innocent life, when that system is supposed to be protecting that innocent life? Innocent Projects and other organizations continue to uncover cases where DNA evidence and new technologies prove prior convictions were flawed. Wrongful convictions are more likely to happen to those of a minority. The death penalty falls more heavily on those from lower socioeconomic backgrounds or those who are a part of a racial, ethnic, or religious group. In a quote from Bryan Stevenson's website, Equal Justice Initiative, the death penalty system treats you better if you're rich and guilty than if you're poor and innocent. This happens because poor defendants cannot always afford a strong legal team to help them. For a system that's supposed to be equal, there is clearly bias. One of the main purposes of the death penalty is to deter crime. But the Death Penalty Information Center tells us that studies find there is no meaningful evidence that the death penalty does deter crime. The Equal Justice Initiative tells us that states that still have the death penalty in effect have a higher murder rate than the states that don't. Those states also have a higher murder rate of police officers than those that don't. If the whole point of the death penalty is to deter crime, why is it still in effect if it's not working? The tax money that they are spending on the death penalty to deter crime isn't slowing crimes, but is killing the innocent. So what's the point? The death penalty has taken the lives of innocent people, unjustly punished the poor and minorities, and fails to make our communities any safer. Let's end the death penalty and replace it with life without parole. This eliminates the possibility of an irreversible error.